Welcome to the Expert Roundtable on Turkey's grand strategy, regional and global challenges. Today, we're joined by a panel of experts, and we're going to be discussing Turkey's foreign policy in all aspects. I'm your moderator, Yusuf, Erim, TRT World's editor-at-large. As part of the media, every day we talk about developments and what's happening in the region, especially from a Turkish perspective. And we talk about individual events, but when we take a step back and we look at these individual events from a bigger picture, we do see that a grand strategy is unfolding in the region, and Turkey plays a very important role in regional developments. And thank God I'm joined by a very smart, brilliant, intelligent group of experts today that are going to help me unpack Turkey's grand strategy and what exactly one of the premier Muslim powers in the world is trying to do in the region and intra-region as well. So without further ado, I want to open up the panel to discussion. Our first panelist today is Michael Reynolds. He's an associate professor of Near Eastern Studies at Princeton University. So Mr. Reynolds, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So in thinking about Turkey's grand strategy today, I thought it might be worth pointing out that in less than 2 years, Turkey will be celebrating the centennial, 100th anniversary of the founding of the Turkish Republic. And I think that's a good place to start, because when the Turkish Republic was founded, the overwhelming strategic challenge that the Republic faced, in fact, the whole purpose almost for the foundation of the Republic, was that of defending its sovereignty against the possibility of great power intervention and partition. That was a very real threat back in 1923, and that's what the Turkish Republic was, again, founded overwhelmingly for the purposes of defending against that sort of threat. And the strategic environment of Turkey today is a fundamentally different one, in that I don't think that Turkey no longer faces the threat of an outside power coming in, intervening, and partitioning the country. I think really the last time that threat existed was during the Cold War, with the threat of the Soviet Union. And then there was a short time when there were fears of this in Turkey, and one could, in the wildest imagination, perhaps imagine that the United States, with its interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, might also play that sort of role of a great power intervening and changing borders. But I think it's clear now, with the continued decline of European power, what looks like an ongoing withdrawal of the United States from the Middle East and elsewhere. It looks like American power is not waxing, but to the contrary is waning. And I don't, despite the fact that Russian power has been rejuvenated under Vladimir Putin, Russia today doesn't pose anything of the sort of challenge to Turkey or threat to Turkey that it did either during the Cold War or prior to that, when it was in the form of the Russian Empire. So this gives Turkey both, in a sense, a great deal more security, and also great more room for maneuver, both in the region and its diplomacy more generally. So that's, by and large, I think, for Turkey, a very good thing. However, the challenges are quite different, and they are real challenges. By that I mean, I'm thinking primarily of the fact that Turkey's neighborhood is in a state of disorder, none like it's seen for really quite some time. By that I mean, looking just at Turkey's neighbors, Syria, Iraq. These are societies that are in Syria in particular, but also Iraq, a great deal still of, one could say, well, again, Syria, a great deal of chaos, and it's not really exactly clear what's going to be coming out of the societies. And the problems that have been in Iraq, that have been in Syria, have flowed over into Turkey's borders. And one could also add to this Afghanistan, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's unclear if Afghanistan is going to be able to reestablish any sort of stability. That too will also influence Turkey. And there's the question of Iran. What is the long-term possibilities for Iran's stability? And I mean, one can go on and name the various conflicts throughout the Middle East. And then you also have the Caucasus has been in conflict, and then across the Black Sea, Ukraine, et cetera. In other words, the point being that Turkey's neighborhood, although Turkey for itself, I think, is in a much better position than it's been in over a century's time, On the other hand, it also faces, again, the challenges of the disorder surrounding it. And the challenge that I think Turkey's leaders face is in keeping those disorders outside of Turkey and preserving order inside of Turkey, while at the same time also preserving the liberty for Turkey's citizens to pursue their own objectives and their own contribute to the prosperity of Turkish society overall. And that's been that ability of Turks to do that has been both a source of Turkish power and potentially could also be a source for stabilizing the region. By that I mean Turkey right now has always been seen as sort of a bedrock of stability in the region, and that's role of Turkey I think is only going to become more important. One, that is the fact that Turkey being able to control its territory in a very direct sense, so sort of acting as a strategic bedrock of stability, but I also say one is a social one, that is an engine of economic development and development of society in areas such as education. And I know right now, given the ongoing problems with the Turkish lira, the Turkish economy is not the best it's ever been. But I think, again, when you compare it to its neighbors, it's in a far better situation, and it has the prospects, real prospects of turning itself around and acting as a driver for the region. The challenges that Turkey faces, I mentioned the challenge, the cross-border challenges, and I won't go into detail there because I don't want to take up too much time. But those are, first and foremost, you have the challenge of the PKK. And that is, I think, again, there's no longer, I think Turkey has the fear, faces the possibility of any sort of outside intervention on the behalf of the PKK that would divide Turkey. But the PKK is still an organization that's been in existence fighting war with Turkey now for some 3 decades, over 3 decades, and it's not going to go away. That's a major challenge that Turkey's going to have to grapple with. It's one that I hope Turkey's allies, including the United States, would be a little more, or I should say even a lot more cooperative with Turkey in facing that challenge. And the way that Turkey takes on that challenge and continues to respond to it will have a lot to say about both the future of Turkey and the region. And it's an extraordinarily difficult one that does require a military response, but has to be much more comprehensive than the military one. And that's one thing I think I would like to emphasize here, that Turkey, I think, needs to get out ahead on that issue, and certainly deserves to be able to defend itself, but its leadership should really be looking ahead to the future and thinking how it is that can neutralize the challenge that comes that's posed by the PKK. Likewise, in addition to that, again, you have the challenge of FETÖ. And I think this is a particularly insidious challenge. And let me say here, I think without going to details, we can do that in discussion. But this is an organization that really has sown a great deal of mistrust inside of Turkish society, and grappling with that and rebuilding in society, trust inside of Turkish society. I'm thinking in particular here of the military, the problem of civil-military relations. It's extremely important for any state, for the effectiveness of its military. It has to be granted its military a good deal of professional autonomy. That's going to be essential for Turkey maintaining its security, that its military be able to focus on its professional development without the fear, and likewise without its civil government, without having to fear, are these people serving in their military, are they looking to overthrow or challenge the government? And that would also apply to universities as well. Universities have been a growth of Turkey, and just one example of that I would point out in Turkish power, the amazing example of the Turkish drones have been quite successful. That surprised a lot of the world and really has changed events inside the Middle East. And that is not the product of the past couple of years. That's reflects the investments that were made in Turkey in the course of the 20th century in things like education. And again, I would just emphasize, Turkey's leaders looking at the future, they need to continue to make those investments and look to the future. And then let me just make, so keeping these sorts of, being able to grapple with meeting these challenges, but yet in doing it in such a way that Turkey does not ultimately harm its own development internally is a real challenge, but it's one that Turkey's leaders need to meet. I want to just flag up 2 other issues. One area where I see that Turkey has an opportunity.
Michael, let's save those issues for the next time around.
Okay, that's fine.
You did give a very, very good summary. I want to give some of our other speakers a little room to talk as well.
Absolutely.
But we're definitely going to come back to you. Michael talked about the challenges at home and abroad for Turkey, whether it be domestically with FETÖ or the economy, or whether it be abroad with various arms of the PKK and the various regions that Turkey operates in, tries to spread its influence and secure its interests as well. Now, next speaker, Professor Ersel Aydınlı. He's from the Department of International Relations at Bilkent University. And Professor Aydınlı, what sense can we make of Turkey being in all these regions and projecting its power, whether it be the Caucasus, North Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Mediterranean, Europe? Turkey is in many, many neighborhoods right now, and it is a very important player on the international stage.
Actually, that's true. A lot already has been covered actually by Michael in terms of the overall the structure of the global affairs. That's true actually, Yusuf, what you say, that Turkey has become much more visible, much more involved, and much more engaging in its international activism. There's no question about that, and I think that was out of a necessity. We are still going through major transformations in global affairs. We witnessed, but we did not see the end of an era, the bipolar Cold War structure. It kind of ended, but it didn't really. And a version of Cold War still continues, particularly in our region. And then the new one, the old one is kind of dead, but the new one is yet to be born. We don't know really the established dynamics of the multipolar world. And these are almost like the birth pains or of it getting consolidated. So that creates a very almost like alternative, not alternative, but at the same time existing multi-political universes actually in global affairs. So the actors, including Turkey, they need to somehow kind of combine the old strategies of dealing with the old issues in the bipolar system or in the past paradigm, and they have to also bring in new tactics, new strategies, and new involvement and engagement ways of dealing with this the shaping up a multipolar structure. I think that's exactly what Turkey is trying to do, because then such complexity forces particularly has been forcing Turkey to be much more autonomous in its international activism, and that acting and that autonomy again is required to deal with these kind of the old and new and unknown and of every type, and we can get into that in the future, but that autonomy, that autonomous acting is also creating tensions. Then it appears to be by some other actors, it appears to be revisionism, and therefore we are already seeing counterbalancing acts within the region, outside of the region, and at the global level. But everybody would have to remember that extra autonomy in its international activism was not just out of the dreaming for something larger shared out of global politics, but it came also a real necessity out of what the global politics is today for Turkey type of an actor. In terms of out of that complexity, when it comes to if we were to identify, for example, the security interests or the security challenges, again, we see the combination of things. But I would agree with the previous speaker, actually, that the security interests for Turkey, more than ever, because of this complex, multiple political universes, is the stability, some type of regional balance of power, and in fact, the sanctity of the national borders and national sovereignties, and also almost state build up in every country, or the capacity build up so that they would take care of their internal affairs, so that there wouldn't be spillover impacts, so that we would have a more stable region, most in Middle East, also in greater Middle East, because Turkey, as it is with its own capacity, still is a European power with its democracy, institutions, with its dreams and economy. So more stable region, both in Middle East and even at a larger level in the greater Eurasia, is something Turkey can benefit with this trading and with this European capacity. It can also majorly contribute to it. So in that sense, Turkey's this multiple roles, more autonomous role is more key than ever. And with respect to security challenges, if we were to say a couple of things on those, Turkey, as usual, is getting its lion's share from the insecurity volume in the world. Then not only the traditionals have been there, but we are getting also unconventional. And I mean, it's been mentioned, but there is the separatist movement. There is the migration issue, which is also threatening the demographic integrity of Turkey. There are all those issues combined with everything else. But there is one thing that maybe should be said as part of this autonomy in foreign policy, foreign engagement. Turkey appears to also have a very major advantage next to many other competing countries or even friends, that Turkey appears to be enjoying a very decisive political will that seems to have a very strong capacity in mobilizing military for international engagement. That's something very rare in today's world. The Western security structures, Western countries particularly, many countries are struggling to put the boots on the ground, as we call it. But Turkey seems to have this extreme comparative advantage that the political will appears to be ready to mobilize also military power in the fastest way. And that's one, but that has tricky, of course, implications, but that's a major advantage to support some larger international vision. One, I think the risk we should also be mentioning as part of this whole picture, as an unconventional, it's not a threat yet, but it might be a challenge, that this great power rivalry in the region is really still going on, some version of Cold War. Cold War did not appear to have ended in this region from the perspective of Turkey. And of course, the tightrope that Turkey is trying to walk between two superpowers, and it has its own, I think, challenges on it. So I'm not 100% sure how sustainable it is in the long term. That appears to be one strategic challenge that Turkish increased autonomous international activism is going to have to really deal with. That because that might have its own limits on it in terms of sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Aydınlı. Yesterday, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlüt Çavuşoğlu, when he was addressing the TRT World Forum, he said in his speech that Turkey uses smart power, which is a mix of what he called his soft power and hard power, and preferably wants to use the soft power, but is not afraid to use the hard power when necessary. And we see the Turkish foreign minister often talk about being strong at the table and being strong in the field, a very Clausewitz-esque view of foreign policy, and very similar to what Professor Aydınlı was saying at the end, that Turkey has that unique capability to be able to mobilize its hard power when necessary to complement the table, to complement its diplomacy, to be able to further its interests, to be able to bring balance to conflicts across the world. So very, very important tool and instrument inside Turkey's foreign policy, mixing the soft and the hard power as well. Now, our next panelist is Özden Zeynep Oktav. She's a professor of international relations at Istanbul Medeniyet University. Professor Oktav, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Erim. I'm very much enlightened by the speeches of the two distinguished professors. And I have a little bit different things to add to Professor Aydınlı's and Mr. Reynolds' implications. And before coming to this panel, I just thought why Turkish scholars thought about the Turkey's grand strategy so little. I mean, so rarely we rarely thought about the Turkey's grand strategy. What was the basic reason of thinking about Turkey's grand strategy? In my opinion, the basic reason is that Turkey has been deeply enmeshed in Western security alliances throughout history and currently, and political economic integration schemes. I mean NATO and European Customs Union, for example. As my colleagues mentioned, that Turkey has some very advantages, but as well as disadvantages, conditions in forming or in formulating its grand strategy. In my opinion, Turkey should focus on its neighboring area. And the basic problem is about the big powers intervention in the region. Let me go into detail a little bit. Turkey really wants to create or to formulate its autonomous foreign policy, and it has many advantages, as I mentioned a little while ago. But in the meantime, Turkey is a sandwiched country between the East and the West. And it has some institutional links with the Western world, North Atlantic territories or geography. And at the same time, it has close relations with Russia and Iran in dealing with, for example, Syria. Another dilemma of Turkey, I mean, security dilemma also, is that Turkey's relations with European Union is getting more and more complicated because unlike the beginning of the 2000s, Turkey nowadays is heavily criticized by EU and even United States of violating human rights, for example, or democratic violations. And this is automatically perceived by Ankara as intervention in Turkey's inner politics. This is a déjà vu, in my opinion, throughout the history. This never changed except the beginning of 2000s. And this makes Turkey to seek new alliances, alternative alliances. At the beginning of the 2000s, as you all know, before the Arab Spring, Turkey wanted to form alliances with the Arab countries on the basis of belonging to Islam. But this came to an end with the Arab Spring. Right now, as far as I observe, Turkey tries to form another alternative alliance. This is the Turkic Council and the Turkish language-speaking countries alliances among Turkey and Central Asian countries, and the meeting of Turkic Council will be held in November, as you know. Both the alliances, I mean, Turkey seeking for different alliances, are automatically perceived by United States as well as Russia as a threat to themselves. Therefore, Turkey has institutional links with the West, and Turkey is conducting Astana process with Russia and Iran. But unfortunately, in the meantime, Turkey's relations or alliances with all these global powers as well as regional powers always problematic, not working in a proper way. And because I just thought, why? What are the basic reasons of having so problematic relations with the United States as well as Russia and neighboring countries, including Iran? Although Turkey has many advantages in having good relations with these countries. First of all, Turkey has a sandwich identity. I just defined the identity problem as a sandwich identity. Turkey belongs neither to East nor to West, and Turkey has been also sandwiched between the alliances surrounding itself. For example, Saudi Arabia, Israel, United States on one hand, and Russia, Iran on the other. Turkey still has a continuing feeling of being alienated from the Western world and could not restore its relations on the basis of friendship with Russia and Iran. And as Mr. Reynolds mentioned, that Turkey has the PKK problem and FETÖ problem, and these are the first number threats perceived by Ankara, by the Ankara government. But this automatically means that United States is our first number enemy. And but at the same time, we are pursuing United States as an ally within the NATO. And Turkey wants equal relations throughout the 2000s, but this never happened, unfortunately. And let me just talk about the economic and military strength of Turkey. In my opinion, Turkey's military and economic strength is combined with its historical status. What I want to mean by historical status is that Turkey actually is the continuation of an Islamic empire. Not maybe it is good to say Islamic empire. What I want to mean is that the Ottoman Empire and the Caliphate, these are very important sources and very crucial material and symbolic resources. And Turkey happened to be a safe haven for the Muslims fleeing from the persecution of many countries. This is also a big advantage, but we cannot announce it very well to the outside world, especially to EU. And Balkans also very important region, in my opinion, because Turkey may be not maybe, but still promoting and improving its relations with non-EU Balkan countries, such as Bosnia, Herzegovina, Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia. But when looking closely, you see Turkey's immediate 8 neighbors have been occupied by great powers. What I want to mean in a nutshell, let me say that the Turkey's real problem is about its relations with the major powers, including namely United States and Russian Federation. And Turkey's, in my opinion, for Turkey's grand strategy, there are 3 important countries as they are gateway, Turkey's gateway to East, South, and West. These countries are Georgia, Syria, and Bulgaria. And Turkey should focus on these core neighboring areas and to keep these neighboring areas from the great powers' influence. And Turkey should do its best to keep the territorial integrity of Syria, Iraq, and the Ukraine, for example. And in my opinion, we just perceive in general terms, we perceive Greece as enemy, but I don't think that Greece is the real enemy of Turkey. As I mentioned, the issue is that the EU and United States standing behind Greece and using Greece as a tool in their hands to weaken Turkey in the area. There are some few more points I want to tell, but maybe in the later we can touch these points. I would like to talk. Thank you very much. I think I talked very long, too much.
Thank you, we'll definitely get back to you. Two very important points that Professor Oktay touched on. One, the territorial integrity of Turkey's neighbors constantly under threat over the past decade, whether it be Ukraine, Syria, Iraq, and obviously any type of fragmentation Turkey views as a national security threat very naturally. And another point I also found interesting was touching upon Central Asia, the Turkic Council holding a very important summit in Istanbul, November 12th, which will have all the leaders of the Turkic-speaking states. I always view Central Asia as a very important geography for Turkey, an area that it has been increasing its influence and support for as well. So definitely developments that we'll have to be following very, very quickly. Now, up next, we have Dr. Ali Bakir. He's an assistant professor for humanities and social sciences at Qatar University. Dr. Ali Bakir, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I didn't know that I have to speak, but let me say that I agree to a big extent with Professor Michael and Professor also Aydınlı. But the idea that Turkey is seeking alliances like in Central Asia or in the Arab world is not too much. I mean, I don't find it accurate too much from my perspective. Maybe yes, we can see that Turkey is going for a stronger relations with the countries, Turkic countries of Central Asia. That's obvious, and this is also causing some problems with countries like Iran, which obviously is monitoring Turkey's activities and is anxious, as we have seen lately. But let me say that in the last few years, we have seen Turkey balancing its vast soft power with more hard power. More hard power tools have been used to tackle the Syria's rising, emerging also security threats from its neighbor, mainly from Syria and Iraq, also in Eastern Mediterranean, in Caucasus. And of course, this could not have been done without the crucial contribution of the Turkey's indigenous defense industry. But my concern is that we have seen Turkey following assertive policies in the region, deploying military in several countries, also taking or executing military operations abroad. This is reflecting Turkey's activism, responding to these rising serious threats. But like I said, I don't know to what extent these or this activism is sustainable, taking in consideration the economic concerns. But besides this, I fully agree that the threats coming from unstable neighbor will not come anytime soon. Second, also the threat of the non-state actors. But I think that some of the points that we should shed light on is the first, I think the situation in Eastern Mediterranean, it's very crucial to Turkey, because if Turkey find in the future any gas, vast gas or oil riches in the area, this will transform and boost Turkey's situation and Turkey's power on many levels. It has a transformative nature. So I think that Turkey is quite serious when it comes to the situation in Eastern Mediterranean, where France and Greece, along with some Arab states, are pushing hard not to let Turkey take its natural role and defend its rights there. Second, I think that also we didn't speak about Iran. I think that no regional country is matched to Turkey right now, whether in a political sense or even military sense. Also, economically, Turkey is the #1 economic power in the Middle East. Yet, I think that any future agreement between the United States and Iran will boost tremendously Iran's status in the region, and this will also pose a serious threat to Turkey's interests and Turkey's current role in the region. For a long period of time, we have known that the foreign interference in the Middle East is mainly based on balancing the powers. So the US aggressive actions towards Turkey is also seen by many Turks as a tool to constrain Turkey's rising power. And this, therefore, the relation with the US is very problematic from this perspective, and it could have also negative implications on Turkey's status, power, and role in the region in the future. Unless it is solved, it will be very problematic, especially while Turkey is seeking autonomous policies and grand strategy. So I think those two challenges should be taken into consideration. I think that the emerging security threats from the non-state actors and unstable neighborhood will not end anytime soon. So we understand that Turkey is responding by increasing its military activism and taking more broad and foreign military operations. Also, the relation with Russia is very problematic because I think that both are working on the common interests right now, but these common interests are not strategic. They are tactical nature. They have tactical nature, and this means that at any point in the future, the positions can flip, and at that point, Russia will also pose a serious threat to Turkey's status and role in the region. I will stop here. I hope I didn't take much time, so we can continue later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Bakir. Iran, definitely an important but unpredictable variable, obviously, in the region, and something we're definitely going to have to follow developments very closely of what's going on with Iran, because it's definitely going to impact Turkey's foreign policy. And the next time around, when I ask specific questions to everybody, I'm definitely going to be asking Ali Bakir more about what he thinks about the Turkey-Iran relationship in the future. Now, up next is Tarek Meherisi. He's a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. So Tarek, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yusuf, and thank you very much for all of these great discussions or contributions that have preceded me. It's going to make my job a lot easier, even if what I say is a lot shorter as a result, so that I don't have to echo some of the great points already made. But you know, when we talk about Turkey's grand strategy in the region, I mean, we have to look at kind of the last few years overall. And, you know, over these last few years, we saw a lot of what you could call policy proactivity. You know, a lot of very successful expeditions in places like Libya, and a lot of kind of savvy policy making to carve out Turkish interests or to make its presence felt. But, you know, when the dust settled on all of these expeditions and activities, I think Turkey looked around and, you know, it saw a lot of very concerned enemies, a lot of strained friendships, and it saw itself quite stretched over the broader region. And we all know that Ankara has grand plans to keep going, you know, to build out into Africa and elsewhere. But, you know, I think if we talk about the grand strategy and the challenges which are confronting it, then we have to see now and the short-term future as a period of consolidation to prevent overstretch. And, you know, we see outreach and some bridges being mended with countries like Egypt, even with the United Arab Emirates, which was, you know, public enemy number one for most of this period of proactive policy making. And so, yeah, the real challenge confronting Turkey today and confronting the strategy is going to be, you know, what kind of working relationship will it build with its European partners? What will this détente with some of its regional rivals, such as Egypt and the UAE, look like? And whether it's going to be able to consolidate the gains that it made in places like Libya and in northern Syria, or whether it's going to have to concede some of its ground in order to maintain this more brittle relationship with Russia and with other powers. But on that, I'll hand back. Thank you very much, Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Tarek. Tarek, again, summarizing very well Turkey's grand strategy in the region. We're going to continue on right now. We are joined by excuse me, Çağatay Akif Kılıç. He's the chairman of the Turkish Grand National Assembly Foreign Affairs Committee. Çağatay Bey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is not the easiest one to pronounce, don't worry.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's been a long day for us too, and I think we can straight jump in there from on that point. And I'm sorry to be a bit late. And hello to all the distinguished guests and speakers and people who are watching us. Look, yesterday we had the trilateral meeting between the Foreign Relations Committees of Georgia, Turkey, and Azerbaijan. On the same time, the Romanian Senate Foreign Relations Committee visited us. I just had a meeting with the Belarusian Foreign Relations Committee. So we have to, I think when we're talking about regional and global development and the opportunities and the strategies that Turkey has, we have to also look into the current position that the world is in, which I mean, for example, and I think this is one of the most important things, right now we are slowly but steadily getting out of COVID mode, if you will. What do I mean with that? We didn't have a proper face-to-face meeting with our counterparts since nearly 1.5 years new. And everybody knows that having a Zoom meeting is good. Okay, we can exchange views, but being in the room with somebody is something else. And you can also, for example, in international meetings and regional meetings, a lot of things happen on the side. It doesn't always happen on the main floor. There's some things being discussed in private on the side, and you can iron out, if you will, some creases, or you can make new introductions. Having said that, of course, globally, the UN, EU, NATO, and energy. These are challenges that the whole world is facing, but Turkey is facing as well. And regionally, neighbors, international pressure on neighbors, and specifically the immediate neighbors of Turkey, Syria, the situation in Syria, to some sort the situation in Iraq, and if you go into the vital Middle Eastern area, of course, other countries in the Gulf countries and Northern African countries. But also the European Union, why do I mention that? Is together coupled here, because a lot of Middle Eastern countries and North African countries also are having right now serious debates with the European Union countries. One major example being France and its president, that how he spoke recently about some countries in the Northern African region. And of course, internally, Turkey has certain issues that we have to deal with, namely the terrorist threat of the PKK, YPG, PYD, which also comes from Syria into Turkey, the northern part of Syria, at least. And of course, from the Iraqi northern part, which is affecting certain issues. The situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, which de facto has been, not de facto, has been resolved now. I mean, Armenia, I believe, has an opportunity here to grasp the chance that is in front of her and have at least a normalization process with Azerbaijan, Turkey, Georgia, with all the countries that it's neighboring. And this will, of course, also contribute to a better relationship with some other neighbors, namely Iran. Right now, Azerbaijan and Iran have a sort of tension between them. And now all of these affect Turkey. But if you go to the north, you have the Black Sea area. And the Black Sea is the part where you can say, you know, there are also neighbors there, not only land border neighbors, but also sea neighbors, mainly Romania, in the sense, Russia, of course, has also a certain amount of very influential thing, and Ukraine. And there is a problem between the Ukraine and Russia, Turkey being close to Russia and Ukraine, but making its arguments and ideas very clear. I mean, we do not recognize and accept the annexation of Crimea by Russia. We say that the Ukrainian territorial integrity has to be protected. But on the same side, we also have a relationship with Russia in other neighboring countries and also bilateral. The question of Greece, which unfortunately, when it comes to bilateral relations with Turkey, is using the European Union as a sort of big brother, if you will, hiding between the European Union agreements that it has with Greece. But the European Union is making mistakes in that sense, where it is making a double standard towards the agreements that it has with, for example, Italy, and Malta, and France, and the northern region of Africa. So then comes in, of course, the Eastern Mediterranean question as well, the carbohydrates, gas, natural resources, and the issue of the island of Cyprus. Not the country Cyprus, the island of Cyprus. I'm using very knowingly these phrases because the island is divided into two countries. Southern Cyprus region being accepted into the European Union, representing a divided country, unfortunately, which is not in line with the European Union acquis, and the Turkish part of Northern Cyprus, which is also, although not recognized by a lot of countries, but it's a reality. The reality is something else on the ground, and this is what is bringing us into this hotspot. So I sometimes say, you know, Turkey's neighboring area is not like, for example, the neighboring area of France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, or Italy. But we have to remember that 150 years, 200 years ago, those areas were also in a very strong conflict with each other. Unfortunately, we are having some problems with some neighbors, but we are not saying that we do not want to have better relations with our neighbors. And we are not saying we want to have any kind of claims on any country's sovereignty. That is clear. So there is some misunderstandings, some understandings that are different, and some things on which we feel different. But we are always in dialogue. So we have to understand that there is also now really, really politically very big questions in the European Union and Europe as a continent as a whole. Brexit being one part of it, what will happen afterwards. We are seeing that Britain has serious problems with its day-to-day life due to some effects of Brexit. The German election has just happened. We will see the new government that will be formed in the future in a couple of months, I think. But whereas Germany is always an anchor in the European Union, Chancellor Merkel is now leaving office. She has been a very balancing actor in world politics and also European politics. But I say always that Germany has a balancing role. Doesn't matter who the chancellor is, but of course Merkel's personal input there was important. And I'm saying that we will see also elections next year in France. So we have to see the results there, as we have mentioned. So the whole region is a bit of an uncertainty. But there are certain things that we will have to work on together, and energy being one of them. And like I said, a post-COVID world, which is affecting all of us. There is talk about 68% of increase of energy prices in Germany. There's increase in food prices around the world. And this is a challenge for all of us. All our citizens are feeling this, this result of this COVID crisis, because the chains for food production, for energy sources, for transportation have serious problems these days, and the prices have increased. In logistics, the prices of a 40-foot container are skyrocketing, but you have to ship goods, you know, to have trade. So there's a lot of things on the plate, not only for Turkey, but the whole world. But I'm sure Turkey will play its role on the table in the region, internationally. And like I said, since we have now opened up or opened up exchanges of delegations, we are going to have a lot of guests, and we are going to travel a lot, and we will see, of course, the results of face-to-face meetings, I hope. I will stop there, and if there's anything else that anybody wants to ask me, I'm happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Okay, the departure of Angela Merkel and Brexit, two very important regional developments that Akif, Çağatay, Kılıç touched upon, that Turkish foreign policy is very closely following. Very interesting seeing as Turkey grows into a regional power, developments outside the country. impacted more and more and are a more important part of its own foreign policy calculations. Now we're going to move on to Luke Coffey. He's the director of the Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Luke, floor is yours.
Thanks, Yusuf, and I want to thank TRT World Forum for inviting me to participate in this important roundtable, virtual roundtable discussion. Hopefully next year it'll be in person, but let's see.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, yes. Just a few, as a discussant, I just have a few observations and maybe a question or two to kind of like kickstart the further discussion of this topic. But my first observation is, though, I believe what we're seeing now with the rise of Turkish influence in the broader region is a continuation of the dust settling in the post-Cold War world. Yes, it's been, over 30 years, but in geopolitics, sometimes things take time to materialize. And what we're seeing is this, the new multipolar world rise at the expense of what was the bipolar world. And of course, Turkey is taking up its traditional role as being one of these poles in this multipolar world. And I often like to joke that if you took a diplomat from 1880 and a diplomat from 1980, and you had both of them cryogenically frozen, and then you thawed both of them out today, it would be the diplomat from 1880 that would probably most recognize the world that we have today, with the different centers of power competing against each other for influence and economic and trade activity and security and whatnot. So this, I think, what we're seeing is to be expected, and it's a natural state of affairs, for sure. In terms of other quick observations, I really believe that Turkey has an opportunity to really enhance its influence in the South Caucasus. It was already mentioned the prospect or the possibility of normalization between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and also maybe Turkey and Armenia. This, coupled with new trade routes, transit routes, could really unleash some of the economic potential for the South Caucasus, which could benefit everyone, including, of course, Armenia. Just imagine how many billions of dollars of foreign direct investment have been denied to this region because of these lasting conflicts. And then also there's an important energy role here as well for Europe, as we have this ongoing discussion about Nord Stream 2, and as we see Russia weaponizing natural gas once again as we speak in some parts of Eastern Europe. We need to look, even further to the east for Europe's natural gas supplies, and the obvious one here is Turkmenistan and a Trans-Caspian gas pipeline. The EU, the U.S. administration in Washington should be championing this idea and working closely with regional countries behind the scenes to try to make this a reality. And I'm fully aware of all the complications about a Trans-Caspian gas pipeline. I've written many words on this, but it's not insurmountable, and it's something that if there is a will, I do believe that there could be a way. And this brings me, in terms of the South Caucasus, to 3+3 format, which no one discussed unless I missed it in this discussion this morning. This is a very debated issue nowadays. My view is I don't understand why Turkey, which has its influence on the rise in the South Caucasus, would all of a sudden want to sort of share in a formal arrangement influence in the South Caucasus in a 3+3 format with Russia and Iran. Of course, Turkey should engage and have cordial relations with Russia and Iran for historical and geographical reasons. This is a reality, but having like balanced relations with these countries is a lot different, I think, from the ideas behind the 3+3 format, which, the way I understand it, will sort of elevate the role of the three bigger countries, probably at the expense of the smaller three countries and at the expense of outside powers like the United States or like the Europeans. So I'm very hesitant to keep an open mind about 3+3. I think in the long term, it would actually be bad for Turkey's influence in the region, and by extension, NATO and the US's influence in the region. And I think it would be terrible for a country like Georgia, and probably not very good for Azerbaijan either. On the specific issue of NATO, which wasn't discussed too much today, as we know, NATO is undergoing a strategic concept process where it's developing its new policy document that's meant to guide NATO policymakers into the future. The last one was published in 2010. I mean, think about everything in the world that happened since 2010, whether it's Arab Spring, Syria, Daesh, Ukraine, Crimea, all this stuff. In the 40-page document in 2010 that NATO published, the word China or pandemic are not used once. Okay, so clearly the world has changed and NATO needs to up its game on this. So this is an opportunity for, I think, Turkey to influence this debate inside NATO about the strategic concepts. You know, often these products are the lowest common denominator approach in terms of consensus inside the alliance, but also I've found that those members who are the most vocal or most willing to push issues are the ones that are most likely to upload their policy preferences into documents like the strategic concepts. And then a bit was talked about normalization with the UAE, and I'll add Israel into that. I think these are loose ends that Turkey needs to tie up as quickly as possible. If Turkey is to continue to maximize its influence in the region, it needs to find some sort of accommodation or some sort of way to get resolution to these bilateral bilateral frictions that it has with Israel and the UAE. I think that could really help. And then this is my final point, from a US point of view. You know, I've always been supportive of the US-Turkish bilateral relationship, and I often say I'm not ready to throw away 7 decades or so of great security bilateral cooperation for 7 or so challenging years, and that we need to work through this and get through this and start by confidence building, finding areas of mutual interest that we can cooperate on to hopefully get us to where we need to be to tackle some of these bigger issues. But when it comes to the rise of Turkish influence in the region, I think the Turkic Council is a great example of this, and that the United States should try to keep an eye on what the Turkic Council is doing, get engaged more. It would be great to see some sort of meeting between U.S. State Department officials and senior leaders of the Turkic Council, in my opinion. The Turkic Council's influence is on the rise, and this is in part from the success of Turkey's hard power, but also I would say the soft power, the cultural aspects as well, which I think someone earlier coined smart power. But when I think of smart power, I think of Rasmussen's smart defense, or Stoltenberg's smart defense in NATO, which turned out to be a disaster. So not a disaster, but not very effective. Yeah, Turkey's smart power, whatever you want to call it. But regardless, the Turkic Council's influence is on the rise. And I think a great example of this was during the Second Karabakh War, where I cannot prove it and we'll probably never know for sure, but I suspect that one of the reasons why the CSTO was so slow at issuing any sort of statement or saying anything meaningful about what was happening during the Second Karabakh War was because that 2 CSTO members, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, are also Turkic Council members, and that link, I think, probably helped at least slow walk or water down any CSTO response to that conflict. So US needs to get more involved, I would say, in that area as well. But that's all I have, Yusuf. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. Luke, you know my view on the Turkic Council and engagement with the US, and I definitely agree with you. I think the Turkic Council is a very important organization with a very, very bright future ahead of it, and also very interesting comments about the small group in the Caucasus. And after giving Valeria and then Anas the floor, I'm hopefully going to have time to ask Mr. Akif Çağatay Kılıç about what he thinks about the platform. But first of all, let's go to Valeria Talbot, Senior Fellow and Co-Head of the Middle East and North Africa Center at ISPI. Valeria, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yusuf, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here this afternoon, participating in this very lively and insightful discussion. Almost all aspects of Turkey's grand strategy have been already touched, very well analyzed. So I have very little to add, just to say that proactivism has been one of the main feature of Turkey's external projection, Turkey's foreign policy over the past few years. It has been involved in many regional contexts and theaters, Syria, Libya, Eastern Mediterranean, Nagorno-Karabakh, and going also beyond regional borders to Afghanistan or of Africa. And of course, Turkey, this activism has had both benefits and costs. And in this phase, I think Turkey is really engaged in mending some relations, in redefining ties, both with regional and international traditional partners and actors. So what I think that Turkey is a crucial role in fostering stability in all the context where it plays. So it's important to consolidate a constructive role. And I have now a couple of questions to our, above all, Turkish panelists, but not only to them. One, I was wondering, how is this proactive foreign policy perceived inside Turkey, both by other political forces and the public opinion? And to what extent does Turkish public opinion support this proactive foreign policy in different contexts and crises? And moving to Afghanistan, if I may, I'd like to know if Turkey's engagement in the country is more a response to short-term interests, such as, for example, containing potential migrant flows, or is it part of a broader grand strategy for Central Asia? And in the latter case, if yes, what are the main features, drivers of this strategy towards Asia? Thank you very much. I stop here.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions, Valeria. I'm going to swing them to our guest, but I want to give Anas Al-Gomati a chance to also talk. And I know talking last is very, very, very hard. And Anas is probably thinking, what do I talk about? Because everyone's exhausted everything. Excuse me. But Anas, I would like you to touch a little on Libya if possible, because while we've talked about the Eastern Mediterranean, Libya could possibly have elections coming up December. It's a country that Turkey's heavily invested in. It's a very important part of Turkey's Eastern Mediterranean strategy as well, also an important gateway into North Africa. So what's Turkey's strategy in Libya going forward, not up till this date, but from now until elections and elections beyond?
Thank you so much, Yusuf, for the question. Thank you for the invitation today, and to the TRT team for kindly hosting us. I have a couple of thoughts on this, and I think I actually don't mind going last because I think there's been so many interesting things that I've heard that I would love to comment on. I think particularly the first three speakers, in terms of Michael's earliest point around Turkey approaching its centennial. This isn't just a moment to mark the history, but the history tells us something. It's a determinant at times of political culture, and it can be a determinant of foreign policy. And I certainly think that is the case with Libya. And it's something that we can focus and follow on, not only in the years to go, but the years that have just passed. And I think what I think that is most important as well here is trying to understand the transformation of the region. Other speakers have mentioned this, that we're now living in a multipolar, some have argued it's an apolar world. I think that's a very, very interesting reality, and I think it certainly plays into Turkey's position diplomatically in Libya. I think that we fail to touch upon one aspect about what this multipolar world means, that multilateral bodies that we have relied upon diplomatically over the last century are now beginning to lose their relevance, they're beginning to lose their effectiveness. And in short, organizations like the UN Security Council are no longer able to play the function that they were set out to play over, in the last century to effectively mediate and bring conflicts to an end through diplomacy. That doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, now one can argue that the UN Security Council is a vehicle for certain powers, either direct powers of members of the UN Security Council or allied members to be able to play a role through using key member states as a proxy. And I think that means that the UN Security Council is almost like a hindrance. It's not really a body that can alleviate tensions and can alleviate and can bring around an end to conflict through mediation. What is the relevance of this? I mean, the relevance of it actually comes back to what Luke was saying in his point around, these differences, trying to be able to kind of mediate differences or bring down. You hesitated to use the word conflict. Like, I'm going to use the word conflict because I think that there is a conflict there, and I think that there are irreconcilable visions in the region. I think Turkey, when it looks at North Africa, yes, we're not a direct neighbor. We don't share land, but we do share an ocean. We share the Mediterranean Sea between us. And I think this aspect is so important for Turkey because over the last 10 years, the transformation, not only internally of many of the countries in the Arab world, and I think it may have been Professor Oktay who mentioned this around Turkey's history again. Was it the Ottoman history? Was it the Muslim history as a determinant of foreign policy? I think that's changed today. I think today when we're looking at Turkey's vision in the Arab world or in North Africa and the MENA region, it's now about political culture. And why I mention that is that over the last 100 years that Michael mentioned in his earlier statement, we know that over the last 61, there have been six successful coups and the seventh attempted in 2016. Why is that important? I mean, Turkey has a political culture determined by the idea of a subservient military. When we look at North Africa and the MENA region, the transformation over the last 10 years, there were protests, there was a pro-democracy movement. But when we think of the structures that they were trying to realize, the conceptual thread that ties Tunisia to Egypt, to Libya, to Yemen, to Syria, is that on the mass mobilization end, these movements that were disorganized, that were very, very difficult to bring around meaningful change, were looking to try to bring around a subservient military. That was the key kind of thread that ties all of these countries together. Some countries have slipped back, as we know, like Egypt, for example. One of the reasons why Turkey does not enjoy a great relationship with Turkey. The UAE, as an antagonistic member of that alliance alongside the UAE and alongside Egypt, Saudi Arabia, France, and Russia today, Libya, are all determined, and Greece, in fact, are all trying to bring around an alliance to bring around a military ruler to Libya, a military that will not be subservient, if you want to call it as many in Libya are seeing it. And I think Turkey is restricted in its ability to find partners in those that either back less subservient militaries or are themselves, a military that is not subservient. And I think that's one of the reasons why, to Luke's point, I think there is this détente. I don't think it has, as a rapprochement, I think it has no substance. I don't think that there is a pragmatic way of, Egypt's foreign policy and Turkey's foreign policy finding a pragmatic middle ground, unless one of the two parts stands back and says, well, let's have not only free and fair elections with integrity, but also let's think about the kind of structures that we're going to leave behind in place. Now, I can speak specifically about what Turkey has done in the past in other countries like Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan in the 90s, when Turkey intervened there, it restructured the military. It wasn't just about parliamentary elections and transition. It was also about SSR. In Libya today, beyond all of the work going on to prepare for elections, Turkey continues to work on SSR in Libya. Why? Because it wants to build those kind of subservient militaries, and it's trying to build partnerships. Now, this brings me back to the original point about diplomacy, because for all of Turkey's huge power, we often refer to Turkey in foreign affairs and in military affairs as a medium power in the region. Well, it was swinging like a superpower in Libya. You know, according to some commentators, at the tail end of the conflict in Libya, May 2020, Turkey turned Russia's air defense systems, the Pantsir S-1s, into a graveyard. Libya was a graveyard for those systems. In days and hours, it basically pushed Khalifa Haftar's forces back in less than 6 days, what took them 6 years to acquire. So we know Turkey's military prowess is perhaps the strongest today in the region. But diplomatically, and this is why the idea of the Turkish Council, the 3+3 that Luke talked about, and all of the speakers that have talked about this diplomatic erosion, the multipolar world that we're living in, that's where Turkey, I think, is looking to its future. Libya, there may be partnerships there may be partnerships in Egypt, and it's not because they're Muslim countries or that they have an Ottoman link there. I think they're looking for partners that share the same kind of political culture, number one. They're struggling to build partnerships with countries and struggling to build diplomatic engagement because there isn't a diplomatic body that reflects Turkey's power today. Yes, militarily speaking, it's one of the highest, if not the highest in the region, but it doesn't have the kind of prowess that, say, Egypt and the UAE enjoy with their relationship with France. France is a member of the UN Security Council and the EU. So diplomatically speaking, those two countries have a significantly higher number of power, significantly higher proportion of power diplomatically at the table than Turkey does, despite the fact that Turkey really shaped the entire military landscape in a period of 5 months between December 2019 and May 2020. That entire period of hard military intervention by Turkey reshaped the entire landscape, reshaped the diplomatic landscape itself, but Turkey hasn't reaped any of the dividends it sees. It's been able to establish its maritime MOU that will most likely continue in Libya, pre-elections, post-elections. It seems like something that Turkey, inbuilt within the agreement, is going to last, whether or not we get an antagonistic president in Libya through elections or a partner for Turkey in elections. But I still think that the major question going forward is now that we've kind of taken stock of what this diplomatic erosion, this multipolar world looks like, what do the next diplomatic bodies look like? I mean, whether it is the 3+2 that Luke talked about, whether it's the Turkish Council that Professor Oktay mentioned, or other speakers have talked about in terms of Turkey's role going forward, I think Turkey will most likely start to look to build diplomatic alliances that do reflect, you know, its stature in the region, its power in the region, but it needs to find friends. And I think political culture is the best determinant of what those strategic partnerships look like. Not the personality to personality partnerships, but something that reflects Turkey's own experience over 61 years of experiencing coups and attempted coups, 7 if you go back to 1913, but also in places like Libya that is experiencing several coups over the last decade. Egypt, because we don't know today what Egypt may bring tomorrow. Tunisia, as it's experiencing its own insurgency against democracy by its own president. Algeria, that could transition over the next several years. So I think, to leave this last point, the Arab Spring is not over. It's just a decade old, and we don't know what the next decade may look like. We also know today that Turkey's military prowess is stronger than what it was only 4 or 5 years ago. And that's not only the establishment of UAVs and the Bayraktars, it's the ability to go and do what others don't do and the speed at which they do it. And I think that's something that in Libya, also in Azerbaijan, we saw that Turkey is willing to take that next step militarily speaking. But I think my main question going forward is, what does the diplomatic landscape, multilateral institutions look like? Because today, or with all this détente talk that we have, these are only bilateral deals that won't end up with anything meaningful, anything substantial as I see them. Specifically when we have these kind of deep, irreconcilable views and irreconcilable structures what we're trying to bring together. So I think of it, the next decade is going to be more questions and less answers. So I'll leave it there, Yusuf, but thanks again for saving me for last.
More questions than answers. Isn't that always the case? But I do feel that Turkey needs a little more outreach with Eastern Libya, especially as a possible election date rolls by. Even if elections don't happen, Turkey does need more outreach with Eastern Libya, especially watching Turkey's rivals like France and Egypt slowly beginning outreach towards Western Libya. So that's important, very, very important as well. And as you mentioned, the UN Security Council, is it a help? Is it a hindrance? If you guys have an opportunity, I recommend you read President Erdogan's book, A Fairer World is Possible. He has a very, very strong outline of what he believes UN reforms should be. I think very, very interesting outlines, lifting the veto privilege, very, very important. Something I personally view as undemocratic. I can't believe that we still live in a time and age where there is a veto when we're seeing a strong majority vote. The UN can't even pass simple resolutions sometimes. Now, I want to get to some questions. Akif, Çağatay, Kılıç, Luke Coffey was talking about the 3+3, 5+1, 4+2, some mathematical way of equaling 6 platform in the Caucasus. And he's saying that this isn't a smart move for Turkey, that it'll hurt Turkey, it'll hurt Georgia, it'll hurt Azerbaijan, but it'll strengthen Iran, Russia, and Armenia's hand. What are your thoughts on this platform and how will it help or will it hurt Turkey?
Well, first of all, of course, thanks to everybody that made contributions, question-wise, and also some ideas there. I think something is misunderstood because I can see in the questions and some of the comments that it is perceived, sometimes maybe, that we are, as Turkey, putting forward a policy which is based not only on a long-term perspective. Quite to the contrary, we have a long perspective of policy from our past, from today, and to the future. The shift in some things that we are putting forward is being misunderstood, I think. And what do I mean with that? Well, we never said that like I said, we want any part of sovereignty or any land or any change of the map of other countries. We made that very clear. But the problem that is arising because of the mistakes of especially some of our European partners, European friends, is putting Turkey into the situation that she is today. Now, our last speaker mentioned Turkey's military strength and its diplomatic response in certain aspects of the area, by which saying that the UAE and Egypt, together backed up with France, is taking different steps in diplomacy. However, I have to disagree on the certain point, saying that France is trying to do the same thing with Greece. Okay, France is trying to stay behind Greece, make bilateral agreements, which are not accepted by the European Union. And the European Union players are saying, look, if we have a general understanding and agreement in the EU, we don't need bilateral agreements with countries by country. If we go into that, every country is going to do bilateral agreements with some other countries, and then we will have no EU. Why is the EU there then? So when Turkey is asked these questions, or Turkey is getting comments on what is she going to do diplomatically, I can tell you that diplomatically, in the sense of international relations, there's a lot of problems going on in the world. Britain and France were mentioned, and Libya. Look, if we mention Britain, France, and Libya in one sentence, I go back to the past years of President Sarkozy, Prime Minister Cameron, where they acted supposedly in the interests of their country and without a UN umbrella, or they claimed there was a UN umbrella, but 72 hours, if I'm not mistaken, into their military engagement towards Libya in those days against President Gaddafi, they asked the Americans to come and save them because they were at the end of their military possibilities and abilities. So you can see that there's a lot of interesting and different ideas that pop up. Certain impulsive decisions are taken, but only if when the question about Turkey is arising. And here I can come back to Valeria's questions and comments. Only if Turkey is mentioned, the question comes and says, well, is the public supporting the government on this issue? Or is the Turkish nation as a whole standing behind certain international engagements of Turkey? I can tell you one thing. In the question of Syria, we have debates in Turkey regarding certain aspects of the issues. Okay, why are we here? We see it differently. What can we do in the future? But one thing is for certain. Everybody across the board is saying Turkey politically and in the nation, on the street, Turkey has to protect its borders and Turkey has to protect its sovereignty. And Turkey has an existential threat coming from today's northern Syrian area. There's no question here. And like we said last week, there was an announcement of that maybe Turkey might be going into northern Syria again militarily because of security concerns that we're having. Nobody said anything against that, politically or in the streets. Coming back to the question of the 3+3, of course, this is in my personal view, and like I said, I had the Georgian and Azerbaijani heads of foreign relations committee here in Turkey yesterday, and we had very long discussions, and we're going to have them next year in Azerbaijan, either in Baku or maybe in some other geographical positions of Azerbaijan. I can think of a few, but I'm not going to mention them here. The question here is the countries at the first hand affected by any conflict that arises in the region want to come to the table. Okay, this is the point where we are starting. Of course, there are bigger countries and there are smaller countries geographically, but also in their abilities to affect certain change in the region. But what we are trying to do is we're trying to bring different aspects of the issue to the table. And Luke mentioned maybe Turkey might be at the backhand because of some other players interfering there. But if you look at today's NATO, EU, UN, whatever you want to have put in there as letters, international umbrellas, there is a big rift, a very big rift. Afghanistan was mentioned. What the US did there, unfortunately, what they did is really, I still can't understand what they did. You know, staying there for what, 20 odd years, building up something which we were saying is not functioning properly and leaving in a week. I mean, if you wanted to put it in the biggest mistake, probably diplomatically or in international relations, write a book about it, make a novel about it, and maybe Hollywood will make a movie out of it. This is the scenario. You can't just leave in a day, in a week, where you have been trying to organize certain things. And we have said this. I mean, we were shocked. I was in the US in those days. When the decision was taken, as a Foreign Relations Committee, we were there. And suddenly all of our American friends, nobody was asking about S-400s, F-35s, everything shifted. And everybody was saying, is Turkey going to take care of the airport? You see, certain things, when they happen, totally mix up the agenda. You know, today you're saying certain countries are saying, well, Turkey has to do this and this militarily or in defense industry, but something happens which nobody was expecting. All of a sudden, everybody goes and says, look, Turkey is a reliable partner. They have a strong military. They have a strong diplomatic corps. You know, they have relations. They have traditional relations, historical relations. Let's ask them to help us. Now, you can see here, if you go, I don't know, numbers, letters, whatever, the reality on the ground will shape in an instant what is going to happen in the next 5-10 years. Putting a plan in this region and saying, well, you know, let's start with a coal and mine agreement, and then come to a community, and then become a union, and then maybe one of our partners leaves with a referendum which was externally modified, and then you have another problem. In this region, it doesn't work like that, to be honest. Okay, there's a lot of emotions in these things. Of course, we are planning. Of course, we have a map. Of course, we are trying to have better relations with everybody. It's not Turkey that is saying we don't want to have relations with you. In Libya, you know, I mean, of course, we are trying to bring people together on the table, but sometimes it takes a mediator or a catalyst or some sort of person or country that says, look, guys, sit down, but everybody knows the reality. It's only how the reality will affect the reality diplomatically once you take steps that are not in the book. By book, I mean totally impulsive. Let me finish on a very quick note on Afghanistan. Look, why I'm bringing up this attitude of the US. We have movies, okay, Hollywood movies, other kind of I don't know, Netflix, the series about the Western countries' planned historical and futuristic developments, that there is an establishment, you know, that will hold up. I mean, we've seen what establishment can do on the 6th of January, unfortunately, you know, I mean, in the States, I mean, what happened in the capital. So there's all this perception in the world, you know, okay, the European Union, Western powers, United States, they have it all figured out. You know, there's a roadmap, and everybody will stick with that. There might be small differences in personalities, but the roadmap is there. Afghanistan shattered this in a week. When we now talk with our colleagues, counterparts, anybody, intellectuals, everybody is saying, look, this is something that nobody expected. Nobody at all. It happened. And now all the world is trying to deal with the mess, I'm sorry to use that term, that was left behind. And certain countries like Turkey, which have historical ties, which can affect some change, which have influence, are trying to deal with it, you know, trying to bring it and steer it in a better place. And on a final thing, it is, I think, very important to understand that no country's democracy is there to be exported into another country. Every country has its own dynamics, its cultures. Of course, there is a frame on which we agree on democracy, but we have to also accept that not every suit fits every country. That is very important. I think we are learning this the hard way.
Thank you, Mr. Kılıç. Now, just the referee's saying 15 minutes. The 90 minutes is up. He's giving us 15 minutes extra time. So I'm going to go into some quick questions and answers. I want 3-minute answers. So I'm going to start with Michael. Michael, Turkey's sent a letter of request to the United States for 40 F-16s and 80 modernization kits. Do you think the U.S. is going to approve or reject this kit? If this request, if it approves, what does that mean for U.S.-Turkey relations? Or if it rejects it, what does that mean? Are we looking at a reset? Are we looking at a clean break? What can we expect from this letter of request?
I mean, coming right after Akif Kılıç's comments, which unfortunately I have to say I agree with him. I wish I could explain to him how he's wrong about what he said about Afghanistan, but it's only you can't deny what he said, and it's the truth. Given and to add to what he said, I would actually say I only see a string of fiascos in American foreign policy, and I could go on much longer than 15 minutes, let alone than 3. So I won't do that. Let me just say I'm still, unfortunately, quite pessimistic about the state of American-Turkish relations. And that, so with regard to these F-16s, this is an opportunity where the United States does have a way to gain back some goodwill from Turkey and reset relations there, get them moving in the proper direction. And this would be an important step. But my understanding, and granted, I'm not in Washington, D.C. at all right now, or anything, not even remotely close. So I can't know for certain, but I'm skeptical about that because I don't have much faith in the Biden administration and their running of foreign policy. And again, I could go on other examples of that. Let me just, again, closing up with Turkey, though, I think the fundamental thing that absolutely, there can be no serious improvement in Turkish-American relations without the United States making a decision. Is it going to stick with Turkey, which has been an ally for decades, or is it going to play around with the offshoot of the PKK? And really, it is the PKK. It's not even an offshoot. No one but the Americans has any illusions about that. But we have kind of tried to fool ourselves about who we're dealing with inside of northern Syria. And this is, I'm amazed that American-Turkish relations aren't worse than they are right now, given what America has done to Turkey and its cooperation. with the PKK in northern Syria. And let me also, while I'm at it, just also FETÖ Gülen. Why he's still permitted to remain in the United States is a mystery to me, and something as an American citizen I found quite offensive, given what he and his organization have done in the United States, let alone what they've done inside of Turkey. And I would say that was before the coup in the attempted coup in 2016. And those two issues are still huge. And I don't see American-Turkish relations really improving to where they should be until the United States takes some steps on those. The F-16s would be a good way of sending a signal to Turkey. Let's try to help each other recover from the mistakes we made. The Turkish purchase of the S-400s was a disastrous decision on the Turkish part. That was a big mistake. But we should both realize, both in Ankara and Washington, both sides, we both made mistakes. Let's stop pointing the fingers at each other, and let's stop cooperating. And from the United States, yes, start with helping out Turkey with the F-16s, but then you've got to stop cooperating with the PKK in northern Syria, and you've got to do something about FETÖ Gülen.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Professor Aydınlı, Michael says the S-400s were a big mistake. Were the S-400s a big mistake? Why did Turkey buy them? And what's your view right now on this balancing act between weapons acquisitions? 3 minutes, I know 3 minutes is not enough time. You can talk probably 30 minutes, but I want to get more people in.
Actually, I may not need that 3 minutes even, but that question is pretty specific, but the countries always do purchases. You know, the history is full of purchases, military purchases, have consequences, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes political, sometimes non-political. And so are the failures, actually. You know, there was a reference to Afghanistan. Failures are extremely common in international politics. Failures, it's the whole history of international politics is full of, it's about all failures. So the thing is, you make something at the time, you make a decision, and then you move on. That's 400s. I mean, the political will sees a merit in it and does it, and then continues with it. And so then you can never know really whether that it would be too early to judge it as a failure, as something wrong, or as something extremely bright. Then because we've seen purchases in the past among other countries that were used as part of the balancing, as part of the building up larger relations, as part of even building up a larger promotional level. But one thing, actually, I want to say one quick thing. Largely what we talked about, all these issues, these are foreign policy acts. These are not grand strategy issues. Grand strategy is about prime directives that guide foreign policy acts. What we've been talking about is kind of operational level, foreign policy moves here and there, and etc. Grand strategy combines all of these with a prime directive, gives the spirit, gives the ultimate goal and the purpose. In that sense, I would say Turkey has all kinds of ideas from the past and the future with respect to grand strategy issues. But some type of apolitical, larger grand strategy at this turn of the century would be the best for Turkey type of country, which would combine both domestic and international issues. And that would be more like growth and stability, increasing economic chances abroad, expanding democratic development at home, combining this and presenting this as the heel of the stability and prosperity in its region and at the globally. I would say then you would start talking about all these issues that we've been talking, and it would be easier to make sense, the little things, when you know what they are supposed to serve to, and that would be the grand strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. I do agree with you. We are talking about aspects within the grand strategy, but I think it's very hard to have one person really sit down and talk about the grand strategy, because everyone has their different areas of expertise. Ali Bakir, an expert in the Arab world, Tarek, expert in Eastern Mediterranean, Luke, a more NATO expert, Michael, more US relations, Valeria more the Middle East. So bringing all these people together and talking about the separate aspects of the foreign policy, trying to bring it together for a grand strategy, that's the best we can do for 90 minutes though. Next question to Professor Oktav. Professor Oktav, you talked about the Turkic Council a little, you talked about Central Asia. This is a topic that I always find interesting. I think Central Asia is the future of Turkish foreign policy. I think it's Turkey's new Middle East. It's its new MENA region that it's going to really concentrate on. What are your thoughts? What is Turkey thinking about? What's its strategy in Central Asia going forward? You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Erim, for the question. Turkic Council is not a new one, actually. It was established in 2009, and it is an intergovernmental organization, and it includes Central Asian and South Caucasus countries. And it is nowadays a very important intergovernmental organization, especially after Americans' deployment of its forces from the Afghanistan. Deployment, I say, retreating from the Afghanistan. And the as I mentioned, Turkey thinks, as far as I know, as an alternative alliance to its other alliances, such as North Atlantic and Russia-Iran alliance, etc. But the thing is that Azerbaijan and Turkish relations, because as you know, Israel also has very close relations with Azerbaijan, and Iran is extremely uneasy about this. Because as I study on Iran, I follow very closely Iranian media, and there are a lot of column writers, complaining about the future of this Turkey, cowardly, not overtly, but this rapprochement between Turkey, Azerbaijan, and accordingly Israel, maybe. Therefore, my point is that not only about the Turkic Council, also in the Middle East, there is a normalization process with Israel. And I wonder very much what is Turkey's approach to this new process, normalization with Israel, because it is also closely related to the Central Asia, and as Azerbaijan and Israel since 2012 improving their bilateral relations, especially Israel very much making contribution to Azerbaijani military power by selling weapons to Azerbaijan. This makes Iran extremely uncomfortable, and Iran is very much perceiving threatened and contained by Israel. And so the Turkey's approach or Turkey's role in this situation is of crucial importance for Turkey. And when we talk about Turkic Council, we don't talk only about the Turkish language speaking countries, integration, etc. But at the same time, we are talking about the changing and transformation of the balances in the region. This is, I really, the most important, the thing which I wonder the most is what the Turkey's future approach to Israel's new strategy. I mean, penetrating to Gulf region with the alliance of Bahrain and United Arab Emirates, and how these relations will affect Turkey's relations with Egypt. And therefore, I just wanted to focus on, at my speech, Turkey's, what kind of a strategy Turkey should adopt towards its immediate neighborhood. This is really very much important. Turkey should focus on its immediate neighborhood, and Iran is a very important key player in this context. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Oktaven. That definitely raises an interesting point. What is the future of Turkey-Israel relations?
Yes.
New Israeli administration came to power just a couple months ago. President Isaac Herzog, a man who has a two-state solution stance, something that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan views as a counterpart that he can quite possibly communicate with. We've seen a phone call between them. Let's see if that phone call could trickle down into better relations, maybe a normalization in the coming months or a year. Now I want to shift to Dr. Ali Bakir, and this is our last question. Doctor, I told you I was going to come back to you for Iran, so you had a long time to think about it. Iran, now, very interesting country. Personally, when I view Iran, my threat perception of Iran over the last couple of years has definitely changed. When we look at the Turkey-Iran border, it's 534 kilometers. But when we look at Turkey's border with Shia militia, it's 1,800 kilometers. Is Iran a national security threat for Turkey? And what's happening? What's the status of that relationship going forward with this new Raisi administration?
Well, this is a very difficult question to ask me, but I think that historically speaking, Iran is a rival for Turkey in the region. It has the potentials in politically, economically, and militarily to challenge Turkey. We know that due to the US pressure and also the long-time sanctions that Iran's capacity was hindered over the years. So now, from my own perspective, I'm talking about my own view, I think that a deal with the US, like the previous one, DCPOA, would give Iran a big boost economically and militarily. We know that Iran has plans to buy weapons from Russia and China, and it already established itself on the region in terms of the relation with the non-state actors and armed militias. It plays this strategy very well. No one can match Iran in this sense. That's why I think that Turkey should be concerned when it comes to pro-Iran militias working or operating from Iraq and from Syria. Having said this, of course, the relation is complex. Iran, I think that Iran was really surprised by seeing Turkey suddenly increasing its influence in the Caucasus and in Central Asia, because Iran historically also considers this region by default pro-Iran, knowing that many of its populations from Persian roots and has also was under Persian influence for hundreds of years. So mostly the competition with Turkey was focused on the Middle East and primarily in Syria and Iraq. But in the last few years, Turkey increasing and strengthening its relation with Azerbaijan, also trying to play a primary and crucial role in Afghanistan, strengthening its relation with Pakistan. These are sending alarming signals to Iran, which is now started to, to act or behave kind of irrationally. It's obvious that Iran feels threatened and, isolated, probably because any kind of a block between Turkey, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan would mean that Turkey has the capacity to reach Central Asia and East Asia bypassing Iran. For a long time, Iran was blocking Turkey's reach to this region and hindering Turkey's economic capacity and military capacity. Now, this will bypass Iran. It will be very problematic for Iran. So I think that if the US is going to make a deal with Iran, we will see this kind of rivalry between two boosted in the coming years.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ali Bakir. I agree with you. I think Iran was caught off guard. They didn't foresee Turkey within 44 days helping Azerbaijan liberate Nagorno-Karabakh so quickly. And we are seeing a huge changing dynamic right now in Central Asia. I feel like everything is being rewritten again right now. And Turkey definitely has one of the pencils in its hand as everything is being rewritten in that region. And hopefully this November 12th summit of the Turkic Council will be an important starting point where these Turkic speaking states can get together, along with Hungary as well, who's also an observer, and we'll see what type of decisions they reach going forward. If you go on their website, they have a very important 2040 vision where they talk about an economic union, free trade agreements, border visa-free, passport-free travel. So I do recommend reading their website. Very, very important vision over there. We're going to close out this session. Çağatay Bey, do you have any closing comments before I end this session?
No, thank you. But just one maybe short comment. Of course, there's the question about the Israeli relations with Turkey, but I tend to ask the questions, how does Israel see its future relations with Turkey? That's also an important question, because the side that has to decide here is not only Turkey, and maybe not in the bigger sense Turkey, but Israel. And like you mentioned, the phone call between the two presidents is an important signal, because we have always said we don't have any problems with the Israeli people, but some acts of the government of Israel, especially in Sharon's time and Netanyahu's time, have really, really strained the relations. And I don't think it's fair to, I don't want to be sounding in, because I have a duty, I have a responsibility, and I can't speak freely on everything. But I don't think the relationship between Turkey and Israel can be compared to other countries' relations in this region, also historically. Because, I mean, 500 years ago, the Europeans expelled the Jewish people from Europe, and it was our ancestors in then the Ottoman Empire, but also in historically that accepted, not only accepted, but gave a safe haven. And we are very proud of our heritage that we have in Turkey with the Jewish people who came to Turkey to the Ottoman Empire in those days, but in Turkey in those days, even today in Anatolia and Istanbul, you can see how the two cultures live side by side. So it's not a question about the people of Israel and the Turkish nation, but how does the government of Israel today want to go forward with Turkey's with the relation with Turkey? I think it's also important to ask the question to them. And thank you for having patience with me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And just to touch out, add one more comment to that. Afghanistan's last Jew left the country just a couple of days ago. Turkish Foreign Ministry moved very, very quickly to grant him a visa, and he's safely in Istanbul. I think that's a sign of history repeating itself. As Çağatay mentioned, during the Spanish Inquisition, Turkey opened its doors to the Jews. World War II, many Turkish diplomats risked their lives to help the Jewish population of Europe. And even today, 2021, October, Turkey once again opening its doors to Afghanistan's last Jew. Unfortunately, he had to leave the country, but he is now safely in Istanbul, and hopefully maybe we might be having an interview with him in the coming days as well. But thank you for joining us, Turkey's Grand Strategy, Regional and Global Challenges. I want to thank all our panelists, Valeria, Tarek, Luke, Anas. I'm sorry I couldn't get back to you for a second round, but next year, 365 days later, I will see you again. Professor Oktav, Dr. Ali Bakir, Michael Reynolds, Professor Aydınlı, and Akif, Çağatay, Kılıç, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for everyone watching from home. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.